The duffel bag slipped from his fingers and hit the driveway with a hollow thud, and for a moment, Sergeant Rowan Hale just stood there staring at his own front door as if it belonged to someone else. The morning sun was warm, almost cruelly bright, flooding the quiet suburban street with golden light, as if nothing in the world had ever been broken. Birds fluttered across the clear blue sky, sprinklers ticked lazily over manicured lawns, and somewhere a dog barked in playful bursts. It was the kind of peaceful day he had once dreamed about during long, sleepless nights overseas. And yet standing there now, home at last, Rowan felt more lost than he ever had in the desert. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one small moment to change a life, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that might need them most. Rowan bent down and picked up the duffel bag with stiff fingers. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The white paint was peeling near the shutters. The porch swing creaked slightly in the breeze. 3 years ago, he had left this house in the early dawn, pressing a kiss to his 6-year-old daughter's forehead while she slept. 3 years ago, he had promised her he would come back. Now he was back. But everything inside him felt different. When he opened the door, the smell hit him first. Laundry detergent. Lemon cleaner. The faint sweetness of vanilla candles. It was so normal it almost hurt. In the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug with crayons scattered around her, was his daughter, Mira. She was 9 now. Her hair was longer, pulled into a loose braid, and she looked taller, leaner, more serious. She looked up slowly. For a second, she didn't move. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, searched his face as if comparing memory to reality. Rowan dropped the duffel again, but this time he didn't notice. He took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding harder than it ever had in combat. Mira stood up. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just walked toward him carefully, like approaching something fragile. When she reached him, she wrapped her small arms around his waist and pressed her face into his chest. He closed his eyes and held her, breathing her in, fighting the sudden sting behind his eyelids. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but he hadn't imagined the quiet distance that hovered between them, like a thin sheet of glass neither of them knew how to break. Life as a single father had never been easy, even before the war. Myra's mother, Celine, had passed away from a sudden illness when Mira was 4. Rowan had learned to braid hair, to pack school lunches, to read bedtime stories in silly voices. When he was deployed, he had left Mira in the care of his sister, who lived nearby. But now his sister had moved across the country for work, and Rowan had insisted on taking Mira back. He believed he could handle it. He had survived war. Surely he could survive homework and grocery shopping. But war did not stay overseas. In the bright daylight of the kitchen, as Mira quietly ate cereal across from him, Rowan found himself flinching at the slam of a cupboard. His hand twitched at the sound of a car backfiring on the street. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying moments he could not erase. During the day, he tried to smile, to ask Mira about school, to help her with math problems, but sometimes he drifted off mid-sentence, lost in memories that did not belong in a peaceful home. Mira noticed. Children always do. She stopped asking him to come to her school's open house. She stopped asking him to watch her practice dance routines in the living room. Instead, she retreated into her room, drawing quietly or reading. Rowan saw it happening and hated himself for not knowing how to fix it. Every morning he promised himself that today would be different, that today he would be fully present. But the weight inside his chest never seemed to lift. One Tuesday morning, after a particularly restless night, Rowan stood outside watering the small patch of roses Celine had once planted along the fence. The sun was high, the sky cloudless, and sweat dampened the back of his t-shirt. Across the narrow lawn, his neighbor, an older woman named Corinne Voss, was trimming her hedges. Corinne had lived on that street for over 30 years. She had watched Rowan and Celine move in as newlyweds, had baked cookies when Mira was born, had attended Celine's funeral with tear-reddened eyes. She had also watched the house sit too quietly during Rowan's deployment. That morning, she paused, leaned on her gardening shears, and studied him for a long moment. Rowan tried to avoid eye contact, but she called out his name gently, her voice steady in the warm air. He forced a nod and walked closer to the fence, wiping his hands on his jeans. Up close, Corinne's eyes were kind but sharp, the kind that missed nothing. She looked at him not with pity, but with understanding. And then she said one sentence that changed everything. She told him that surviving the war did not mean he had to fight every day after coming home. The words were simple, almost ordinary, but they struck him harder than any explosion. Surviving did not mean fighting. He had been living as if every day were still a battlefield, scanning for danger, bracing for impact, guarding his heart from loss. He had thought strength meant enduring silently, pushing through without complaint. He had believed that asking for help would somehow make him weaker in his daughter's eyes. But as he stood there in the bright, ordinary sunlight, the truth settled over him like a soft but undeniable weight. He was still fighting ghosts. And in doing so, he was pushing away the very life he had come home to protect. Corinne did not lecture him. She did not pry. She simply placed a hand over her heart and told him that Mira needed a father who was healing, not just a father who was home. That afternoon, Rowan sat alone at the kitchen table after Mira left for school. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. He stared at his phone for a long time before finally searching for the number his commanding officer had once given him, a counseling service for veterans. His thumb hovered, hesitating. Pride warred with fear. Then he thought of Myra's careful hug. Of the way she had stopped asking him to watch her dance. He pressed call. Healing did not happen overnight. There were sessions where Rowan barely spoke. There were mornings when getting out of bed felt like dragging himself through mud. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sharp edges of his memories began to soften. He learned breathing techniques for when panic crept in. He learned that trauma was not weakness. He learned that strength could look like vulnerability. One Saturday morning, weeks later, Mira stood in the living room again, music playing softly from an old speaker. Rowan sat on the couch, hands clasped together, determined not to drift away. Mira glanced at him uncertainly before beginning her routine. Her movements were light, hopeful, full of a child's quiet resilience. Halfway through, Rowan felt tears sting his eyes. Not from pain this time, but from something warmer. Pride. Gratitude. Love so fierce it almost overwhelmed him. When she finished, he stood up and clapped, the sound echoing through the sunlit room. Myra's face lit up, truly lit up, in a way he had not seen since before he left. She ran into his arms, and this time there was no glass wall between them. Word spread slowly through the neighborhood that Rowan was doing better. He started volunteering at Myra's school once a month. He fixed the peeling paint on the shutters. He replanted Celine's roses with Mira by his side, teaching her how to press soil gently around fragile roots. One afternoon, as he and Mira laughed over spilled potting soil, Corinne watched from her porch, a small smile playing on her lips. Rowan caught her eye and nodded in silent thanks. She waved him off, as if to say it had been nothing. But it had been everything. Because sometimes it is not grand gestures or dramatic rescues that save us. Sometimes it is one steady voice in the daylight reminding us that we are allowed to stop fighting. Years later, Mira would barely remember the details of her father's deployment. What she would remember was the way he showed up at her dance recitals. The way he listened when she talked about her dreams. The way he learned, imperfectly but persistently, how to be present. And Rowan would remember that bright Tuesday morning, the scent of roses in the air, and a neighbor's quiet courage to speak truth. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that healing is possible and that kindness can change a life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your engagement helps spread stories that matter. And before we close, I have a special request for you. Comment the word hope below if you believe that no one is beyond healing and that one kind sentence can make all the difference. Because on an ordinary, sunlit street, a single father learned that coming home was not the end of his battle, it was the beginning of his healing. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one person brave enough to remind us that we deserve peace.